Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with RotoWire's Erik Halterman. And I say RotoWire because Erik has been with us for 5 years, but he is now full-time RotoWire. RotoWire for Life's Erik Halterman. Erik, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. Great to be finally officially features editor. Exciting new title that I get to find out what that means as we go.
You basically get to edit and post everybody's article. You'll get to unless I sneak one in on you there, you'll have to edit my stuff and you can tell me how brutally wrong I am on certain things. So it'll be great.
Yeah. Haven't yet done that, although I do edit Todd Zola pretty often, which is interesting. I get to co-host with him on the MLB Network Sirius XM show we have. So getting to read his work multiple times a week and tell him when he's wrong is interesting. Interesting to edit somebody who's been at this, decades longer than you have. But
exactly. Sometimes just a fresh eye. That's all it is.
Yep.
We like seeing that. And, we have certain style points we follow and things of that nature. And I appreciate you stepping in. Fred Zinke is at his kids' hockey tournament out here in SoCal. Fortunately, we're not going to have the opportunity to meet up. But I'm actually leaving tonight, actually, tomorrow, overnight for my golf trip. So I don't get to meet up with Fred. He comes all the way out here and I don't see him. So bummer on that. But you're stepping in. I appreciate that. And, I'm going to be covering a little bit of, you're going to be like in a couple of weddings later on this month. So I'm going to actually be playing your role with Todd on the MLB show.
Yep. Straight from Erik to Erickson. I don't know if we ever work together regularly. We can work that one in somehow.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen at least once or twice more coming here. Lots of stuff to talk about here. Lots of injury news. I didn't mention in the outline, but Wander Franco had surgery. He's out for a good chunk of time here. I think 6 to 8 weeks. Been a rough fantasy season. I got in standalone leagues, redraft leagues. This is a cut now, right?
Yeah. What's the timeline? Was 6 to 8 or 5 to 6? It's at least out through most or all of August. We're looking at 2 to 4 weeks at the end of the season. I mean, with the talent like that, if you have very deep bench spots, you'd like to have 2 to 4 weeks of that. But
yeah, they said 5 to 8 weeks, fractured hamate bone. We've seen Joey Gallo get lost for the season for more than 3 months before. We've seen other people, get back, come back in 4 weeks and be better than ever. Matt Olson, for instance. So wide range of outcomes there.
Yeah, hamates are scary, though, because they can sap power for a long time, and you're just never sure. So valuing him heading into next season, that's going to be tough because his numbers are going to look bad, too. Mm-hmm. Although there was a stretch where he was pretty good. I think it was like late April or so. I remember
he was
writing,
on fire to start the season. Yeah. And we're like, yes, he's ascendant. And then he really struggled in May. He only has 5 homers this year. 5 homers, 5 stolen bases. So the concern was with him is like he's a more polished player than fantasy player. Like he's going to be great in real life. He's going to have hit for average, hit for a high OBP. But maybe not get you the power of stolen bases. Well, he's not even getting you, a 308 OBP isn't paying the bills either for the Rays. He's 21. Breakouts still can happen. I think he goes rough. He might even go slightly cheaper than he was last year, but I bet you the hype train will start up again, especially if he finishes September strong and you'll still have to pay a similar price. He's just, what Julio Rodriguez is doing is what a lot of people thought Wander Franco might do.
Right, take that next step. I mean, he has the best baseline you could ask for. His contact skills are off the charts. I don't know if I've seen anybody coming up through the minors like that. So if you're looking for a guy to add something to his game, you want a 21-year-old with that kind of baseline. But the problem is that's going to, I think, push up the price next year. Ideally, you'd like to get a bargain on a guy who really wasn't that good, but is really talented. But I think there's just going to be too much hype that I don't think I'm going to be able to snag him everywhere like I might like to if there really was that bargain.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I think there are certain players like that, though, that you just never get the bargain. Yeah, there's always a believer in that. Keeper leagues, you might start to, start being in like places where you have to think about extending him. The RotoWire staff keeper league, it probably won't be that way because the way our system works is he was a $0 contract last year. So he was in his A year this year. So you still have another year at the $3 price before you have to start making hard decisions about how long to extend him.
Yeah, plenty of time there. Don't think I'd be really looking hard to trade him away either unless I'm getting a lot. I mean, obviously he has a ton of value to a contending or to a rebuilding team if you are a contender. Well, you want something out of that slot, but man, it's tough to give up a guy like him.
I was just going to say though, but I mean, flags fly forever. If you're a contending team right now, it might be worth it. It might be worth it to try to see, someone's going to trade a lot for him there. A lot of, and granted, a lot of expiring contracts, but are expensive players, but still, I mean, you should be able to find, there should be a match out there in dynasty and in keeper leagues. It's just, do you want, it all depends on where you are in the cycle. If you're a team that's primed to win this year, and that was just the one thing holding you back, well, then I think you got to think about a deal.
Yeah, fair enough. I should say I'm definitely not ruling it out. You just better get a lot. I mean,
absolutely.
He's still one of the best assets out there. I mean, he's still younger than most top prospects people are getting excited about, often by multiple years.
Exactly.
So don't sell for anything less than an absolute haul.
Vinny Pasquantino just got called up. He's 24, and Wander is 21. Won't turn 22 until next March. So yeah, I think you really, really got to think about that. Really just totally get as much as you possibly can there. But what would a trade look like? I mean, Max Scherzer, an expense like a $40 Max Scherzer for your, I'm just using the RotoWire staff keeper league as an example. He's probably even more than that. In fact, there's no probable about it. I know he's way more than that. That would be kind of like the type of player I'd be insisting on getting if I'm giving up Franco for the long term. I want to get, you got to go all out if you really want him.
Right, an ace for half a season. Maybe if you're getting Scherzer for next year as well, it's tough to give up, 3-4 years, maybe 7-8 years, depending on your league settings of Franco for what's it going to be, 15 starts of Scherzer. It's a top 25 dynasty talent. I think he was 22nd on our latest dynasty rankings. Right. That was obviously before the injury, but I don't even think I'd do it for. Well, again, depends on the situation. As you said, flags fly forever. But even agreeing to give up years of Franco for half a year of Scherzer is tough to do.
Very tough.
Even if you might have to.
Yeah, there's two things. You better get a mint, and you better be darn sure that this pushes you over the top, that it's got to be worth it. Not just making the playoffs, not, if you're in a head-to-head league, not just making the playoffs, but like, okay, this is going to be put me way over the top. Joel Hernard says, this is an interesting question. I think I know the answer you're going to say, but would you do DeGrom for Franco right now to win? And the news on DeGrom is he's making a rehab start this week. So getting closer, my answer is no. He's making a rehab start Thursday, could come back next week, after the All-Star break. I think that was the plan all along. I don't think I would because of the risk factor here.
Yeah, as somebody who bought in on DeGrom a few too many places this offseason, during that brief window when, hey, he's pitching and he's looking good.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see him all the way back before I would say he has as much trade value as Scherzer, right? I think if you had to get either guy today before we see DeGrom back, I think it's still Scherzer. Obviously, because Scherzer's really good. There's not a ton of pitchers who I'd want more than a shot at having DeGrom, but I think Scherzer's still one of them.
I'd agree with that. So anyways, I think we've surrounded that issue enough with Wander Franco. Let's move on. A couple other big news items. Shane Bieber pitched and ended the longest complete game drought in a franchise. So currently a current franchise with the Guardians, throwing a complete game against the White Sox today. Game went like 2 hours and 9 minutes. Bieber was rough in his previous couple outings. He was not pitching like an ace. He absolutely was today. And the White Sox, man, they're just circling down their drain. I don't understand this team at all.
Well, so much of it has been injuries, right? They haven't had their full team for any stretch. They've been hit as hard as any contender that I could think of. They're still without at least DeGrom. And I guess not DeGrom. I meant Grandal. Not sure
Grandal, and he's coming back this week, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe he'll come back after the All-Star break. A lot of times these rehab assignments work like that, but they're 41-45. Lance Lynn missed a big chunk of time, and currently there's an imposter inhabiting his body right now because he's really awful since coming back. Giolito has been, we did a whole episode on what's wrong with Giolito, and then he went on a West Coast swing and was really good, but he's all over the map. Dylan Cease has been great, but Anderson's been hurt at times. Eloy just came back, and he's taken he's some good moments, some not so great moments with Eloy so far. The only great story so far really come from the White Sox is Andrew Vaughn, who's been great.
Yeah, he's doing what everybody kind of hoped he might show last year. He showed some in the StatCast numbers, I think, last year, but it was on the whole, unremarkable. A pretty good bat, but that's not necessarily good enough to make you a huge asset at a corner position or really should be a first baseman. But I think if you look at teams that are going to perform much better in the second half than the first, a healthy White Sox team has to be up there, right? I mean, there's not too many guys who you're changing your opinion on other than maybe Lynn. It's just they need to actually have those guys out there.
Yeah, that's right. But man, it's just they got beat yesterday. They lost the opening game of the doubleheader today. So that's 2 in a row. They're down to 41 and 45. But despite all that, despite their disappointment, they're 6 games back in the Central. Again, almost half a season. 3.5 games back in the wild card. Very quiet. Suddenly a crowded wild card race. Now that Seattle and Baltimore have entered the chat. That's really kind of it's also the number of teams you have to overcome. The Mariners have won 8 in a row. The Orioles have won 8 in a row. Things that you didn't think you'd be saying earlier in the season. But White Sox, I mean, they're still all right. I mean, it's just, you're right. The pitching has been disappointing. Johnny Cueto has been pretty darn good. As Joel says, he might be their best pitcher. Is he better? Has he been better than Dylan Cease over this time? I don't know. I don't have any Cease. So every time I look up, I see Cease striking out like 10 guys. And I think, okay, he's their best. He's their ace right now.
Yeah, not a lot of pitchers anywhere better than Dylan Cease. But Cueto, he's looked fine. I mean, that 2.91 ERA, all the ERA estimators are just over 4, not really striking guys out. But he's a capable major league starter, which is probably more than I would have guessed heading into the year.
Well, considering they were rolling out with some other shakier pitchers earlier on this season, like Dallas Keuchel, I mean, those Dallas Keuchel starts were really rough. Vince Velasquez was starting a bunch of games for them.
Do you think maybe next year's year Velasquez puts it all together?
Sure. Why not? That sounds like a jaded Phillies fan right there.
Yeah, a little bit of that.
But no, I do not think so. You mentioned Julio, or we mentioned Julio in context earlier with rookies, but in Wander Franco. But Julio sitting out tonight. He's serving that 1-game suspension. Julio Rodriguez is doing that. Not much analysis there. Just if you're in day-to-day leagues, get him out of your lineup. If you're in weekly leagues, just proceed assume it's a day off and you move on.
Yeah, this staggered suspensions thing, that was new to me. If it's happened before, I must have missed it going by. To see guys serving suspensions all in a row to punish the team as little as possible, it's not exactly what I expected to see coming out of a big brawl, but I guess it's helped the Mariners.
A little bit. I mean, I think it's an acknowledgement too that, the Mariners didn't start it.
Right.
They might have gotten Julio's suspension wrong. I still haven't seen a punch he threw, but then again, I haven't been like OJ looking for the real killers. I haven't been looking out for the real punchers. He might have thrown some punches in there. I just didn't see it. But like in the initial pass by, I didn't see it. But hey, this Mariners team is red hot. After being such a disappointment earlier, they've caught fire starting since like the middle of June. I think they've only lost 3 times, including winning 8 in a row now. Now, granted, they had a stretch where we thought their season ended, where they had a homestand against the Angels, where they won the first game on a Friday night, got swept in a doubleheader on Saturday, lost another one, got shut out on Sunday, and you're like, okay, we can just write the epitaph on the Mariners season. And since then, they're like, no, we will fight like lions. And they've been really good lately, and they've jumped back into the playoff hunt.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough talent there that it shouldn't be too surprising. And they're doing all this with Jared Kelenic in the minors. Not that he ever produced much in the majors, but he's got to be coming up at the start of the second half, right? 959 OPS in 41 AAA games. Strikeout rate is a little high, but just over 26%.
That's really high for AAA, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but for a guy who's at 37.5 in the majors.
But I think that just illustrates that there's a big leap between AAA and the majors, especially for certain players that are strikeout prone. I mean, I always look for that. I mean, I always look at K percentage from AAA hitters. I mean, at that point, because you're starting to see now at AAA, some pitchers can locate at least. And, so they're strikeout guys that strike out a lot more, they're going to kind of show it a little bit more. And then there's that big leap in stuff plus location at the big league level. And so it's not like 2 or 3% higher. It's 10% higher. So if he's 26 at AAA, that's probably 36 again in the majors. And then you're looking at 210 again.
Right. Yeah, he probably needs to be at least 30, 29 in the majors to really be a useful everyday player. So I guess this means you're probably not bidding much when he comes back up.
No, well, they got Haniger coming back soon. They've got Kyle Lewis coming back soon. I think they might just keep him down. I haven't seen any notes. I haven't seen any notes one way or another. I don't have any Kelnick anymore, so I haven't been really tracking all the notes on when's he coming back, right? Because I'm just kind of like, one league I had him, I washed my hands of him.
I never actually had him in the first place. I just saw his minor league numbers and figured, hey, let's stash him for a couple weeks for $1, see what happens.
That was a whiff for me and Yahoo Friends and Family. I whiffed on that one there, and that's a 16-teamer. You miss a 10th round pick there. It hurts because the replacement value is so nil. I've got like some really I got Matt Vierling active in that league. That's how much I've been struggling to fill all my hitting spots. I trade for an outfielder and he gets hurt right away in Austin Hayes. So it goes. It happens. But Mariners, I mean, Jesse Winker has caught fire after a miserable start to the season. Eugenio Suarez is, he's slugging. He's doing what he does, except he's hitting 240 while doing it. 240 is fine. When you hit 210 and you do what he does, it hurts.
Yeah, and if you look at his expected numbers, well, I guess the last 2 years he was expected to hit 215, but it was never quite that bad. He shouldn't have been at the very bottom. I don't think 190 was the expectation. I do think somewhere 220-ish, where he has some years where he's 30 points below that, some years where he's 30 points above that. I mean, It's not like he's striking out Joey Gallo levels. He's usually high 20s, just with that really high launch angle. That means he's not getting hardly any BABIP luck on grounders falling through and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true. Suarez with 114 strikeouts though so far this season. I mean, that's still pretty high, but you know what? He's playing better defense. He's back at third base where he belongs. It's actually, his walk percentage is up a little bit. That helps, and he's doing what the Mariners expected out of him. Remember, Winker was the prize in that deal. They took on Suarez's contract to get Winker, basically. It was the way it looked. And, hey, the Reds won financial flexibility for points unknown. But anyways, I'm not a bitter, jaded Reds fan, so we'll move past that.
Are you not enjoying your owner's new yacht? Is that not bringing you personal joy?
Yes. Where else am I going to go? Elsewhere. But, anyways. Braves Mets, big series. There's a lot of big series. There's, your Jays are hosting. I mean, your Phils are visiting your former Jays. We've got Rays and Red Sox going on. A lot of big series here, but Braves Mets. Max Scherzer came up big last night. Outdueled Max Fried. That was a battle to the max, I guess. And that's what they got Scherzer for. Was just that type of game.
Yeah, and they've been able to withstand, an injury to the best pitcher in baseball and still lead a competitive division. Helps when you have, on pure talent, what is Scherzer? 5th best-ish, 5 to 8, somewhere in there still. Obviously, he comes with the injury risk, so he might fall a bit behind that in fantasy drafts. But, when you've got two guys that good, you can handle one of them being out that long. If DeGrom does come back and is fine, and they don't get hit with too many other injuries, maybe they do start to pull away. But Atlanta's competitive. I don't think it should have been a big surprise that they've fought their way back in this.
Yeah, well, Atlanta caught fire. They found the weak spot of their schedule, and they added Michael Harris, and I think that was huge, getting him to play center field. Scott Jensen and I talked a lot about him on Sunday. We both love him. He's playing great defense in addition to filling in that big hole in their lineup there too. So, that was massive. And now they get Kenley back probably as early as tonight. I know he did a simulated game yesterday, so maybe they'll hold off one day and use him. Maybe not. We'll see. But that just lengthens out that bullpen a little bit more, and they need that. Big series right now. They want to be able to keep touch with the Mets. They need to win at least one of these games.
Yeah, Harris is basically the answer to what if Christian Pache actually had a bat, and it's working out quite well. Good for them to call him up straight from AA, right? Would love to see that from a team that needs a player and just says, you know what, he's ready. Let's just take a chance.
He's our best option. Let's go for it. Forget about service time. Just let's go. And that worked out really well for them. I like seeing teams rewarded for that too. And they last year, I mean, they didn't swing for the fences and get the big name, but they got they addressed what they needed last year. They got Soler, they got Peterson, they got Rosario. Rosario's back now, by the way. I think he doubled his RBI total for the season to 2. But it was astounding. It's more not to take a pot shot at him so much as to note that, wow, he really was on the struggle bus before he got sidelined with the eye issue. And obviously that was a big factor in that too.
Yeah, I also couldn't hit major league pitching if I couldn't see very well. So
yeah.
don't want to blame him too much for that. But
that's your excuse, and you're sticking by it.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have glasses, so I guess I can see now. But if not for that, I'm sure we'd both be
this close. This close. That and me being old and stuff. But yeah, oh well. Not having the talent, but whatever. But Dansby Swanson made the All-Star team, part of your barometer fantasy and your fantasy All-Stars in your latest MLB barometer. You know, I'm a huge Dansby stan, so I was very happy to see that.
Yeah, I really hadn't even noticed just how good he is. I don't know. This happens to be sometimes where a guy's doing pretty well, but
yeah,
644 OPS in April, but since then, he'd be top 15 in batting average, runs, steals, and RBI, and he's 22nd in homers. Just an all-around force everywhere. That speed is the new thing too. He never stolen more than 10 bases in a season.
Right, that's right. The thing is, I always thought he was like a 2010 guy, and now it might be 25-25, which would be awesome. I don't expect him to keep running at that pace. Actually, I think as everybody gets healthy, everybody's back. They may need him to, stay healthy. Don't run as often. He's not like he's fragile or anything. He's not on the Buxton plan, but I just don't think he'll run as frequently.
Yeah, he's also got a pretty high BABIP this year, so not everything's going to stick there. But I think when you're better than your baseline in multiple different areas at once, you got to like that because, say he doesn't run as much, but he's still hitting more than usual, or maybe he doesn't hit quite as much as he was, but he's still running more than usual. I mean, anything but a complete collapse of all of those improvements leaves him as, better than the guy you drafted him to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was on my soapbox in draft season that he wasn't being valued. He had his breakout and he wasn't getting priced accordingly. Good for me. I have a lot of them because of that there.
It was a couple years with a barrel rate of north of 11%. I mean, you gotta like that, even if he strikes out a bit much and wasn't running.
Yeah,
that probably should have cued us all into that. There was something a little bit more there.
Exactly. So, Dansby. We'll talk about the rest of Erik's barometer. We'll talk a little bit about his Phillies, but first, a note from our Blue Wire sponsors. All the RotoWire podcasts are on the Blue Wire network, and we are happy to be there and happy to play their ads. So thank you for indulging us there. Let's talk about your article. You do the MLB Barometer every week for us. And this week it was the Fantasy All-Stars, and always fun to kind of look at each player, each position, not necessarily the best player at each position, but going by profit, basically, assume is your methodology.
Yeah, I wasn't this week. I was doing more subjective, but pretty much trying to stick with, the fantasy league winners, the guy you drafted with a mid-late round pick, or the guy you even maybe picked up in April, but is performing like a third rounder. We could just go with the top earned value at every position, but that's less of an article and more of a, hey, just click on this leaderboard. So I picked out a bunch of my favorites. Mostly, it's an excuse to talk about Alejandro Kirk again, I think.
Exactly. These are the Alejandro Kirk All-Stars, and I think you and Rob Silver have been the biggest advocates for him, and Kirk has lived up to all that there. 10% barrel rate and only a 9% K percentage. It's crazy good, especially from a catcher too, for crying out loud.
Yeah, 23-year-old catcher. I think it's beyond crazy good. I don't know if people realize just how unprecedented that combination of skills is. Guys who strike out in the single digits don't have power. That's a rule almost.
Right.
They're Luis Arias's, they're David Fletcher's. It's all but guaranteed. So I took a look at the guys who had a single-digit strikeout rate in at least 250 plate appearances in the StatCast era. Kirk's got the highest barrel rate. Only one guy is even within 3 points of him, and that's peak Daniel Murphy. People might remember late Daniel Murphy as something not that amazing, but peak Daniel Murphy, his combination of elite contact with some good power, Nobody else even has an above average barrel rate. In third place, it's Jose Ramirez at just 6.6%. There's Jose Altuve and Buster Posey round out the top 5, but in years where they actually weren't hitting for a ton of power. There's just actually nobody like what Alejandro Kirk is doing right now. Nobody has above average power with this few strikeouts.
Yeah. Although it's worth noting that Jose Ramirez is doing that this year too, and it informs a lot about how good of a season he's having.
Right. Although Ramirez has dropped his barrel rate. Early in the season, Ramirez was my go-to comp for Kirk and saying, hey, look, he's basically Jose Ramirez, but at catcher. He's not barreling the ball quite as much recently, but a good season, the best Jose Ramirez seasons do look a lot like what Alejandro Kirk is doing now, plus a bit of speed.
Yeah. He's getting pitched around more. Today against the White Sox, I saw he fouled off a pitch. It's 0-1. They didn't like that swing, so they intentionally walked him after that. It's nice. Only the second weirdest intentional walk involving the White Sox this year.
What I was going to say, did Joe Madden take over for Tony La Russa or something?
Well, no, remember the Justin Turner intentional walk earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was
like
brutal.
Clearly wrong.
It was with 2 strikes. Yeah, it was. It was crazy. I think in that case, a runner advanced, so that's why he did it. But
right,
it was. I think it was 0-2. Yeah, it was something really bizarre.
It was as if he was trying to go by the math, like he was trying to be clever, right? Because hey,
right,
the situation's changed now. Suddenly, the math says go for a walk, but the math didn't come close to say go for a walk.
Right.
It was,
and I
definitely some over managing.
Yeah, and actually, I think they did it to pitch to Turner, and then Turner homered. I think it was they intentionally launched Max Muncy. That's it.
Yes,
and then Turner homered after that, which is just beautiful. Love it there. Good times there. So Alejandro Kirk, we could talk for a while on him. I love him. Share your love with him. I don't have him in enough leagues, but I have him in some places there. I do. By the way, the Jays just activated Danny Jansen today, and they sent down his the other battery mate there, Gabriel Moreno. So it's Kirk DHing a lot and Jansen behind the plate. The pitchers apparently really like pitching to Jansen, so watch for that. It means guys like Tapia and Biggio are going to lose some playing time.
Yeah, and I think though that's why I never was worried about Kirk, despite that crowded catcher situation. Though, is his bat is just good enough that he should be an everyday DH. If that was a thing the Blue Jays felt they needed to employ, if they needed to never use him at catcher, he's there. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of playing time for those other fringy guys that you mentioned.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Let's. I'm not going to hit every player in your article, but let's talk a little Jon Berti. Man, I have 0.0% rostership of Jon Berti. I don't have him anywhere. I had him in places last year. I'm in 20 roto leagues, Eric. I don't have him anywhere. So June kind of sucked for me, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think I picked him up maybe one place and got a good amount of steals, but certainly wasn't on him before the season. It didn't really look like he was going to play all that often. And when he went down with an injury, I guess it was COVID actually for him early in the year. Up to that point, he was starting less than half their games. So I bet a lot of people who did invest in Berti dropped him. I mean, why would you keep around a bench player when he's on the injured list? So I bet there's a lot of people who missed out on 25 steals in 37 games since he returned.
Yeah, and he's had a couple of 3-hit games last week against the Mets. Of course, he wasn't in the lineup yesterday against Mitch Keller. And more famously, he wasn't in the lineup against Noah Syndergaard, so we couldn't see the singularity between the guy that can't get caught and the guy that can't stop anybody. It would have been like, if he could have gotten on base, he could have had like second, third, and home every time. It just, I don't know. Probably not home, but
going for that 10 steal game.
Yeah. Be like, there was a game the Padres stole like 8 bases against the Rockies one time. I want to say it was in like the early 2000s, but it was just one of those games you look like one guy had like 5 stolen bases, and they just were running wild against him. But that's what happens with Thor. Everybody takes their turn to run against him.
Yeah, was that Berti's original emergence? I remember he came up like late September in his first year as this late 20s guy who had done nothing in the minors, and he stole like 3 bases in a game. It may have even been against Syndergaard. And that's what got him noticed, I think, just by playing in just like 10 games that year.
So 2019, he had like 4 games in 2000 with the Jays in 2018, but 2019, is when he really made his first initial impact. Had like 17 stolen bases that year, and trying to see, he had a 2 stolen base game against the Rays. And then against the Mets, he actually didn't do anything in that, but that was in August. Trying to see if he got called up earlier. No, yeah, actually he might have. Anyhow, you can look through the 2019 game logs. They're on Reporty's player page.
4 steals on September 24th, 2019.
There you go. There you have it.
I'm guessing that was a Thor game.
Yeah, it probably was.
It was.
Brandon Drury, your third baseman on this list. I want to talk about a guy who's just a middling career. As at one point we thought he was a power option. I remember when he was a Diamondback prospect when he came up and he was first getting playing time. Then he was the guy holding back Vlad. Now he's a guy with career barrel rates and exit velocities and hard hit rates and all that. Yeah. Is this sustainable?
Yeah, he was the epitome of a forgettable guy. So there's 2 different ways that you can talk about something being sustainable, right? There's one, hey, he's shown this level in the past, so why wouldn't he continue showing this level in the future? That's definitely not him. The other way you could talk about it, though, is, hey, the underlying numbers really back this up. And that is him. I mean, a barrel rate of 12.3%, 12%, strikeout rate around 22%. Guys who have numbers that look a lot like that this year are guys like Matt Olson, Nelson Cruz. I guess it's the old version of Nelson Cruz, but still, he's hitting the ball like a very solid power bat. So as long as he keeps making the same kind of contact, he's going to have similar results. Now, it's obviously way tougher for us to say, is a guy going to keep, having the underlying performance that he's never shown before? But at least in terms of, has he earned what he's done this year? I think he certainly has. You've probably watched much more of him than most people, because I don't think many people have bothered to watch a ton of Reds games. Does he?
Why?
When you watch him in the box, does he look like, hey, this is a legitimate above average major league player?
He does. I was just going to say, if you're sitting on Bob Castellini's yacht, you've been invited as the Reds GM to come visit him on his yacht, give him some shrimp or something. And he asked you, what are you going to do with Brandon Drury? What's your answer? Do you trade him?
I mean, don't they kind of have to? You don't want to go down to nothing left, but he is, 29, is he?
Yeah.
29, 30? He's a free agent too, isn't he?
Yeah,
signed like under. Yeah. I don't see how
he was signed a 1-year deal. He was a free agent. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see any point, unless you can work out like a 2-year, $30 million extension or something. I don't know what's fair. I wouldn't necessarily want to be locked in long term to a 29-year-old who's had half of one good season.
Right. Exactly.
But I think they could get something real from him, right? I mean, this is a guy who's got some defensive versatility, who's really earned his very strong numbers this year. I think he might find you a prospect or two that you didn't think you were going to get heading into the year.
Yeah. And in a market where there's not too many obvious sellers, I think that has to be, they have to really think hard on that. I think they really got to shop around at the very least. I mean, Luis Castillo is the best pitcher that's purportedly on the market, I think. I would be surprised if he does not go. If he didn't go, it's only because they found the offers wanting. And, you'll start hearing that the Reds are asking too much for Luis Castillo's stories, from the rival GM planning that story with, John Heyman or whatever. You'll see those type of stories. Bob Nightingale, for sure. Bob Nightingale, definitely.
But every seller is going to ask for too much this year, right? Isn't that going to be the main effect of the extra wildcard spot? If there's fewer sellers, that means every single seller, they know what they're sitting on. They're not competing with many other sellers. I think we are going to see some high prices for some guys sold at the deadline this year.
Right. I wonder how active the buyers will be, though. I mean, like, the Jays should be going after a starting pitcher. Absolutely. The Phillies, your Phillies, I mean, you have a GM that historically has always been a buyer who wants to win. He does not know what a long-term plan is. He's all about winning now. By the way, I'd be happy to have that. I think, although just don't let him build a bullpen because he seems to have issues with that. But let's morph into Phillies talk here. First of all, we'll start with the question from DJ Mel. What do you think of Nick Castellanos? He expected more than 8 homers at this point. I did too. He went like a month without one.
Yeah, I expected more too. I would say the Phillies from Castellanos and Schwarber have gotten collectively probably what they expected, and I guess maybe that's why you buy 2 DHs with a lot of power, is because you'll get one good one. Things don't look way off for Castellanos, but he is off in pretty much all the underlying numbers. Barrel rate has been above 10% for 4 straight years. It's at 7.5 this year, which is meaningfully down. It's not like it's completely cratered, but it's definitely a big step down. His hard hit rate is way down over 12 points from where it was last year. He's making a little bit less contact than he did most recent seasons, but a 23.3% strikeout rate isn't that bad. So I'd say on the whole, he only seems slightly off, but it is real. His struggles are, they are in line with those underlying numbers.
Yeah.
Now, will that continue? It's pretty hard to say. I think, though, it's nice in a way to have that insurance of a guy who's clearly underperforming but has a long track record of being way better than this. When a guy like Schwarber, eventually realizes it's no longer June and falls off a bit, I think the Phillies can say it's pretty likely that Castellanos can pick up some of the slack, but he's been a real disappointment, and it matches that underlying numbers there.
Yeah. Schwarber has worked out in his 4-year, $79 million deal. Castellanos in his 5 for $100, not so much. And I just thought that, hey, Philly's a great landing spot for him. And it just hasn't quite worked out that way. But again, we're talking half a season here too. He can catch fire at any point here, and that can change things a little bit. They're right now, they're playing better ball than they were when Bryce Harper was carrying the team. Weirdly enough, maybe it's because they were waiting for him to carry the team the whole time.
Yeah, or is now the day when we finally say, oh, wait, managers do make a huge difference. We should have known all along. Us stat heads have been saying managers don't matter, but I think they've won 2/3 of their games since Joe Girardi's been gone.
Is that coincidence, or do you find that it's being managed differently, other than maybe the bullpen? It's funny that when they fired Gabe Kapler, it was like, oh, at least we got a pro in here in Joe Girardi. He'll manage the bullpen better, and the bullpen's still trash.
I doubt it's done much, because I still am a stat head who doesn't think that managers do a ton, although as a fan, I was thrilled about the move. I just don't think, has there ever been any point in Joe Girardi's career where someone said, wow, what a Joe Girardi move right there? I just don't think he adds a lot. In contrast to a Gabe Kapler, where you're like, oh, wow, that sure looked like a Gabe Kapler game out there, which isn't always good. But I kind of want my managers to at least have something, have a signature, even like a Joe Madden. He made some weird mistakes, especially maybe late career Joe Madden isn't the guy you want. But on the whole, I'm more interested in a guy who at least does something. It never really felt like Joe Girardi was doing anything to adjust the trajectory of the team. It seemed like he was just kind of there and generally not screwing up too badly, but it never really felt like he was adding to the team's win percentage.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, there is that desire to do something. You always see that. Sometimes do something is just hilariously, tragically wrong, depending on your viewpoint there, whether it's Joe Madden intentionally walking Corey Seager with the bases loaded, or Tony La Russa doing his thing. I mean, that's doing something, but maybe just step away a little bit there in that case. But I also think the composition of the team, younger team, maybe you have one type of managing style, older team maybe a different. Maybe it's like an absence of Girardi interpersonally. I don't know. I don't really know that aspect of it there. I don't know the man. Don't know how he related to the Phillies players, but often that does happen. So you kind of look at that there. We have news on the Phillies front. Alec Bohm got hurt last night, sliding into second base, hurt his finger. Didn't look good. Looked really bad. Dislocated ring finger. We'll see how long he's going to be out. But he was already going to not make the trip to Toronto anyhow. He's one of the Philly 4 that weren't going to make the trip due to vaccination status.
Yeah, unfortunately, we got a few too many of those. To be fair, Aaron Nola and Kyle Gibson weren't going to pitch in this 2-game series anyway, and I think Gibson has cited some interaction between medicines he's taking as his reason. But losing JT Realmuto, losing your catcher because he decided to not fulfill the requirements to cross the border, pretty disappointing. I mean, it's only 2 games, but you'd like to see guys making themselves available for the whole season if possible.
Right. 2 games, right? It's only 2 games.
Yeah, just a 2-game series.
Yeah, 2 games. He and Bohm we're going to miss this year. And they've lost a lot of infielders too. I mean, they had the really bad injury to Gene Segura. That was a killer. I think it's especially because they're forced now to roll Bryson Stott on a regular basis and Didi Gregorius. And you kind of want one or the other defensively and maybe get something better. But here we are. Now you're down your third baseman. You're out Harper. Even like backups like Matan and Camargo are also hurt too. So they're really digging kind of deep in their infield slots right now.
Sounds like a Brandon Drury destination. I mean, if this Alec Bohm thing is more than temporary, seems like a pretty good fit. Because the one thing about the Phillies is it's not like we have a lot in store to go buying guys. There are a couple good young pitchers, but this is not a deep system. Phillies have never had a deep system. This is one of the reasons this rebuild has dragged on for so long is you're supposed to start a rebuild you're supposed to tear down and then have a top 5 farm system and, rely on those players to get you there. I don't think the Phillies have had a top 15 farm system in a decade. So
see also Dave Dombrowski though. I mean, that want to have a top 5 farm system. Don't bring him on board. They don't have a prospect in the RotoWire top 400. The highest rated prospect, according to James Anderson, is Mick Abel at 125, Andrew Painter at 134. There's not too much in the cupboard there to even deal, like you said.
Right, and they've seemed hesitant to want to let go of either of those good young pitchers because they just, they don't really develop guys very well either. There's been a lot of flaws in this organization at pretty much all levels, which is why we have the longest drought in the National League, longest playoff drought. So it's either they part with 1 or 2 of those good young pitchers and try to make something of a splash, but I think the Phillies probably are looking at a Brandon Drury type, unless he's too expensive too. But I can't imagine he costs that much for half a season.
Right. Well, especially because financially it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
So that's the other thing too. And that's what makes him a good trade piece, by the way. If you're worried about a luxury tax threshold, well, Brandon Drury is your guy because he costs nothing. So that's one way to, that'll be interesting to see of how much teams care about that. The Dodgers, I think they're already going to be paying a draft price. They're going to be punished for exceeding the threshold last year. How are they going to deal with the compounding of it there, or are they going to really pay heed to that a little bit? We mentioned the Phillies farm system. I mean, the failure of guys like Moniak and Kingery, him not developing it was just a really bad blow to this organization because they signed him before he ever played a game in the major league level. You thought that, okay, he's going to be one of those regulars, and he can't even keep a major league roster spot, let alone a starting roster spot.
Yeah, and to make things even sadder as a Phillies fan, I think his deal was pretty similar to Ozzie Albies's. It was a little cheaper, but it was signed around the same time. They're around the same age. One of those guys is a perennial all-star. The other guy is a below-average AAA player at this point. It couldn't have been much uglier there. Yeah. But again, it's not like there's been a whole lot of other guys who've turned out a whole lot better.
Well, yeah, and for every quote-unquote bad deal a young guy signs, like Acuna or Albies, there's Kingery, there's Jonathan Singleton. Right. There's risk involved on both sides of the coin. And that's really the illustration here. Missing on guys like that. And I think Moniak was a super, super high draft pick too. I mean, the opportunity cost, you don't get to draft that high very often. And when you miss, it's just brutal.
Yeah, the Phillies did have the bad luck of that was the year they were the number 1 pick, and there really just wasn't a number 1 level.
Yeah, it was number 1 overall. That's right.
Yeah. So it looks even worse, but there wasn't another guy that all the analysts were saying, man, you should get this guy. People said, sure, Moniak is, probably about as good as the other choices. They actually went a little bit cheaper to get him, so maybe he would have been about the 4th or 5th. Yeah. And then the guy they drafted with the savings blew out his elbow right away. So there was a world in which it made some sense. It was a tough scenario. Again, I don't know who else they were supposed to get.
Right. But man, it wasn't a Harper draft. It wasn't a Strasburg draft. Yeah.
Right. It's probably, I think, the weakest pool of number 1 candidates in the last decade, and that just so happened to be the year the Phillies were number 1. But still, that's not an excuse for even if we say Moniak would have been the 8th pick most years, you got to get something out of that guy.
Yeah, can confirm. Here's the top 10 in that 2016 draft. Moniak, Nick Senzel.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked out. I blame the Reds for screwing him up, not him, but we'll see. Ian Anderson. Okay, he's having a fallback here this year a little bit, though. Riley Pint for the Colorado Rockies. No.
Is he out of baseball?
He might be. He was a high school pitcher from Kansas. Yeah. Corey Ray for the Brewers. Didn't work out. AJ Puck, to be determined. Go where the puck's moving, not where he's been. But sorry, had to make the joke. Braxton Garrett, we're seeing him finally in the bigs. And he's okay, but he's not
looking like a number one kind of guy for sure.
Cal Quantrill pitched yesterday, got a win, but again, not a star, just a 4th starter. And Matt Manning hurt. Yeah. Zach Collins.
Kyle Lewis is probably somewhere coming up.
He's soon. 11. Josh Lowe is 13. Kirilloff 15. Forrest Whitley 17. That one could have been really good, but wasn't. Gavin Lux at 20, finally hitting for average, but not much power, and a horrible defender still. I don't see a star yet. Eric Lauer having a pretty good year, but Carter Key bust instead of Key boom. Will Smith, the catcher, at 32 by the Dodgers in the compensatory.
I guess if you did a redraft, he's number 1, right? But obviously he was not in contention for number 1 if he went 32.
Yeah, it's a rough look. The competitive balance round, Nick Lodolo went in that. He's going to be pretty good, I think, someday. But he was hurt. He's taking his time. But not a whole lot of sure things in there. So it was a tough draft to have number 1 over pick. You're right. Pretty bad stuff there. Let's go on. Let's move on. Quick question from Matt Leahy. Do you think they'll make Sir Anthony Dominguez the closer or continue to use him as a high leverage reliever?
Yes, since Knebel lost the closer job it was mid-June, he had a weekend where he experienced some shoulder issue while warming up, and then instead of going to the injured list, they said, "Yeah, let's give you one more shot."
Right.
He was terrible. And they still didn't actually send him to the injured list. They just took him out of the firing line in the closer role. Since then, I think it's 3 saves for Dominguez, 3 for Brad Hand, 1 for Knebel again recently, although that seemed to be because those other 2 guys weren't available that night. Also 1 for Andrew Bellotti, who's actually a nice find. I don't think he's should close many games, but the one thing the Phillies did do right, I think, or the biggest thing they did right, is they brought in this assistant GM who I've never heard of from the Rays. And that's what I've always wanted the Phillies to do, is bring in guys I've never heard of from the Rays. And this guy's 28-year-old, I believe his name is Ani Kalambi. I don't think anybody out there is up on assistant GM prospects, but supposedly he's this bullpen whiz. I think the only fruit so far is Bellotti, who was a 30-year-old with basically no experience before then and is striking out over 30% of batters this year. I wouldn't want him as a closer, but he's a legitimate piece. This is maybe not notable for anybody else, but as a Phillies fan, we don't ever hit on these guys. We never pull a guy off the scrap heap and have him be a legitimate piece. So he's in the mix. I see nothing that says it's not going to continue to be some sort of committee. I wish it was Dominguez. I think he's clearly the Phillies' best pitcher, but they haven't shown any signs that they're looking to move off that committee. In theory, the right-left committee between him and Hand makes some sense, although Hand's underlying numbers are so sketchy that I'm not at all confident in that. He's worse than average in strikeouts, walks, and ground balls. I don't know why that guy is pitching in the 9th, except that he's, I guess, escaped enough jams.
Well,
but I see no suggestion that it's about to change, even though I wish it would.
The Phillies are compiled. They compile. A lot of the bullpen building was compiled of guys we've heard of before that aren't quite at their peak. Jose Alvarado, Uris Familia, Hand, Knebel. Knebel was pretty good for a while last year. I still hold some hope on him bouncing back. It's just a question: is he really 100%? But
yeah, I really liked that signing. I hated the other signings, but I really liked the Knebel signing. I thought he was the best reliever the Phillies had since, I guess, Jonathan Papelbon. But it's gone bad in pretty much every way. Since he was taken out of the role, his ERA might be okay, but I think it's 9 strikeouts against 6 walks. So not much of a hint of a turnaround there, I don't think.
So what are the Phillies going to do at the deadline? They're buyers still, right?
Definitely buyers, but again, I don't think a big buy is coming because I just don't think they have the pieces in the cupboard. I think they look for some relief help. Every team always looks for some relief help, and I think they get an infielder depending on how long Alec Boehm's out. Obviously, it'd be nice to finally have a good center fielder, which we haven't had in since Shane Victorino, but I don't know if there's one out there at the price range that the
They're
Phillies
hard to
can
find.
afford.
If you play in a sim league, you start to realize really quick how hard it is to find a good center fielder, and you got to hold those guys like they're gold.
Right. There's only so many guys who can even defend center field adequately, and the pool of those guys who hit well enough that you're excited about them is quite small. So maybe I saw Michael Taylor mentioned somewhere as not something that's going to happen, but the kind of thing that could happen. He would be inexpensive and can defend center field. I think it's going to be Michael Taylor's and Brandon Drury's more than anything too big.
I think you're probably right. I think actually that's probably, all things considered, a pretty good fit and wouldn't cost them that much either. Currently sitting 46 and 41. They are in the wild card right now. They did lose the last 2 games, unfortunately for them, but now 2-game series at Toronto. We mentioned the non-vaxxed, but now they have to deal with Toronto, a team that is on the slide right now. They are in a bad way. They've lost 4 in a row. They're 1-9 in their last 10. They are still the last wild card. They're similar, 45 and 42. I mean, these are similar teams when you think about it. I mean, in terms of performance versus expectation, at the very least, we thought they'd be better at this point in time. Toronto is better at home than they are on the road. They do get Danny Jansen back.
Yeah, Toronto could really use Vlad looking like Vlad. I feel like that's probably the biggest difference. He's just looking at WAR. He's just below 2 WAR. You might have hoped that he was worth about 4 wins at this point. He hasn't been bad. I mean, a 130 WRC plus, you're not going to complain about that. But if he starts looking more like himself, if Bo Bichette starts looking more like himself, he's been basically a league average hitter. You've got those 2 guys who, again, aren't they're far from terrible, but they're a noticeable step back from expectations. That's going to lead to you underperforming by about 2 or 3 wins. I think those are probably the 3 wins right there. I guess throw in Jose Barrios too, who really looks shaky this year. He's been a replacement level pitcher according to Fangraphs. Yeah. So there's a few big names there. Yeah. Well,
and Barrios goes tonight, so that'll be interesting. But Bo Bichette is 25 for 26 on the bases last year, 5 for 10 this year. Maybe he was just, I mean, he was obviously very good at that, but when you get, it's not worth running that often if you're going to get caught half the time. And that's the thing that's a danger, is that maybe he runs less, which is what would follow from his career. But when he's coming up as a prospect, when he stole 25 bases last year, it was a little bit of a surprise. He had the 32 stolen base year one year in 2018, but he also got caught 11 times. So seeing that great success rate on the base pass that young is not that common. It's, there's one thing to be fast. It's another thing to be good at stealing bases.
Right. Only 8 total steals in 75 games over his first 2 years. So maybe we should have expected more like 15 this season. Although, again, like you said, doesn't look like we're even going to get that.
Yeah. Jays need pitching. Yusei Kikuchi did not work out. He's on the IL with a fake injury right now. But he's just been awful. Kevin Gossman's hurt right now. He missed last week. A lot of people had him active with the day-to-day, and tough call again this week too, for that matter. It looks like he'll probably pitch, but still.
Yeah, and Alek Manoah also, he's got a great ERA, but he's seems to be in over his head according to a lot of the ERA estimators. Like XFIP has him a run and a half behind. So if he starts falling off, and if Gausman's injury is more than a short-term one, suddenly that rotation goes from what looked like quite a strength to a massive weakness for a contender. So they really need Manoah to keep, I think, pitching above his head there.
They really, I think they need to add at least one pitcher at the break, maybe one reliever too. But this is something they've needed in other years too.
Yeah, but again, they're not that far. So if you get the rebound from the big bats, if you got that extra wild card spot, I'm not too worried about their playoff chances. Obviously, they're going to be in a real fight. It doesn't feel to me like they need many pieces. the talent, I think, is still there. I think they're in more of a need of a bounce back from their key pieces, and then maybe one addition rather than needing a whole bunch.
Yeah, I think that's right. So we'll see. I mean, the Orioles are nipping at their heels, and the Orioles have a great farm system coming up. So they're a team on the rise. The Red Sox are above them with a lot of money to spend if they want to. I think the Rays are in a bad way too. I think that's one thing going in the Jays' favor is the Rays. I mean, we just talked about Wander Franco being down for a good chunk of time. They've had countless injuries and a lot of bad hitting.
Yeah, we just kind of assume that the Rays are always going to be fine, even if they've lost half their team, because we assume that the next guy's up. I mean, they have to be good. They're on the Rays. But
right.
It doesn't necessarily actually work like that. We assume that they're always going to have this great bullpen full of nobodies. But when they lose so many guys, and I think it's no surprise that they're not quite what everybody thought they were going to be. And if they really are without Franco for almost the whole season, I think no amount of Isaac Paredes is going to make up for that.
Right. I think we had a nice little window with him, but we'll see how far that goes. They really need like Josh Lowe to actually perform anything close to what they had hoped for. Vidal Brujan got sent back down. He can't hit major league pitching. They're getting Brandon Lau back maybe this weekend. So that could be big for them. They need something out there as a stopgap.
Yeah, Lau, I mean, he's one of the best hitting middle infielders out there, so he'd be a huge get. Yep. But man, Brujan, like you mentioned, him just looking so lost. I liked him a lot of places. I really thought with that speed and his positional versatility, he's going to find a role, even if he's like a 90 WRC plus guy. But he was like 50 or 60 or something. He was nowhere near competitive. And I didn't see that coming at all. I thought he'd be a below average but capable hitter who fills in everywhere. So I think that's a big.
Well, he looked overwhelmed last year in his call-up. Like, striking out a huge percentage of the time. And that to me it cooled my interest on him this year. I think Pat, the playing time was hard to find. Now it turns out the path was there and he still didn't take it. So, that's even more frustrating is he could have established himself with Lau and Franco out and losing Manny Margot was a big loss for this team. They lost Kiermaier again. And he still can't force his way on there. That's the thing that's really frustrating. If you have him in a keeper league in a dynasty format, you really have to be pretty wary of him going forward.
Yeah, I just figured with so many AAA games under his belt, there was nothing left to prove that they'd have to find a spot. But is this a rare loss for the Rays player development, or was he just never all that good and us fantasy guys were blinded by the speed? Maybe
a little column A, a little column B. Maybe we'll see. Honestly, I was going to talk about our keeper league and our two keeper leagues, but we've already gone an hour, so I think we're going to scrap that today. But anything else?
I'll just throw in that you're winning one of them in case you wanted to mention that.
Oh yeah, in Illinois League, I had a really nice set of keepers, all super cheap and spent big, and the guys I spent big on in the auction have done well. So that's a good formula. Have good keepers and buy good players. It seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I tried to do that. It works sometimes. It is not working in those two particular leagues. So, oh no, we don't have a time to talk about either of them.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, Ryan Helsley is a golden god. Let's keep it that way. Yeah. We'll just leave it at that. All right, Erik, good stuff. Really appreciate you coming on, doing this today. We're not going to do a podcast next Tuesday because of the Vegas trip. You're going to Vegas, right?
Yeah, I'll see you there. Looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to that too. We'll probably do some video hits from there. So we'll do a lot of stuff there. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for all the comments and questions in the forum. Appreciate that. Tomorrow, it's going to be the Prospect Podcast with James Anderson. Please make sure to tune in. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.